hope this finds you well and living your best life in Jesus Christ. As a teacher, there are very few things worse than finishing a hard-taught lesson and asking, "Are there any questions?" and hearing crickets. Younger and more inexperienced teachers often think, as I did when I was younger, that this is a positive thing. And you can hear it in your head. You can say, "I must be the most awesome teacher that ever lived because everyone in the room understands just what I taught." However, the truth is quickly borne out if you start asking the students questions about what was just taught and you see blank expressions and confused looks. Then you start to get frustrated. Didn't they hear anything I just said, you ask yourself? And the truth of the answer is, well, they heard some, but not much. Every parent in the world understands what just happened. You got tuned out. Educators have known for a long time that the human brain can't handle long periods of instruction and still be able to retain and process the information. Our brains are designed to act as a filter. We filter what our minds decide is important from what is unimportant as it comes in. If the brain decides it's important, well, then we pay attention and process it using our experience to make sense of it. If the brain decides it's not important, however, then the brain puts it in short-term memory for easy disposal. Anyone who has ever taught kids of any age will tell you that a short lesson taught badly is often much better than a long lesson taught well. This is the reason that Jesus pretty much kept all his lessons and sermons and parables short and interesting. He knew our brains didn't work the way we think they do, and he wanted us to remember and understand what he was telling us. Many a minister, myself included, could learn a lot from studying the teaching style of Jesus. But as any teacher or parent knows, there's an old saying that goes, "Familiarity breeds contempt." Kids become accustomed to the person teaching after a while, and they begin to automatically assume that they can ignore you, thinking, "Well, I've heard that before." Parents grow accustomed to this and compensate by saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, which actually makes the whole thing worse. Even Jesus had this problem with his own disciples. He often got pretty frustrated when they didn't seem to understand something he had said repeatedly. A perfect example of this I found was in Matthew 16, where Jesus tries using an analogy about yeast to warn the disciples about the Pharisees and Sadducees' teaching. And the disciples start arguing about bread. They're going, "We didn't have any bread. We didn't bring any bread." I mean, you can hear his frustration in his voice as he tells them in verse 11, when he repeats himself. "How is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread, but be on your guard against the yeast of the Sadducees and the Pharisees?" This was evidently a pretty common occurrence, even with them. Imagine how frustrating it must be for God, who wants to share spiritual truth with us, and we're just preoccupied with physical stuff. Jesus spent years with his disciples, and only occasionally did they show a glimmer of understanding what it was really talking about, what he was really doing. I find it interesting, however, that at least one disciple didn't hesitate to speak up when he just didn't understand. His name was Thomas. And what do we call him? We call him Doubting Thomas. Let me give you an example. In John 14, Jesus and the 12 were gathered to celebrate the Passover, and Judas had left under mysterious circumstances. Jesus began to disclose revelations about his life and the future. He warned about upcoming events, but he also sought to assure them. He said, "Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, also believe in me." He was going to prepare a place for them, and he said, "And I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way where I am going." Now notice the last sentence. Well, questions must have flooded the minds of the disciples. What exactly did Jesus mean by that last part? See, others might have pondered these issues, but it was Thomas who was bold enough to ask a question. He said, "Lord, we don't know where you're going. How do we know the way?" Here and throughout John's Gospel, Thomas, if you read it, appears to be a disciple who could be fearless. He was willing to speak up when the others were timid or afraid. We don't know what would have happened if Thomas hadn't asked that question. But his question, his boldness in asking the question, provided the context for Jesus to give a statement that is the central to the gospel. He says, we all know it, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There's an old saying, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. And it seems to me that the rest of the disciples lived by this saying. They often seemed reluctant to respond when Jesus said something they didn't understand. But Thomas showed a willingness to ask questions, and because he asked, we can learn important things about Jesus. And through his example, we can see that Jesus doesn't get angry or reject us when we ask questions. On the contrary, he wants us to understand, and he would much rather we ask questions than remain in the dark. Literally. In fact, these questions can open the door for life-changing revelations and insights that we would not receive any other way. But we have to fearlessly ask questions, even at the cost of possibly looking pretty stupid. So let me ask you today, do you have questions about the Bible, your life, the world? Join the club. Me too. Every saint throughout history has had those questions. And when we don't ask them, we are actually showing disrespect to God. We need to remember the example of Thomas. We need to be bold, be fearless, don't hesitate. We need to ask God for the answers we need. So, in this case, speak up. If you have a question, ask it. Like I said, in my case, I'd much rather open my mouth and be thought a fool than keep it closed and know that I am. I hope you make today a terrific day, and I want you to know that I'm here if you need me. I love you all.